Good evening and welcome to tonight's panel. Thank you for logging in this evening. My name is Dr. Tiffany Davis, and I'm an Associate Professor of Sociology and the Interim Associate Dean for the College of Arts and Sciences here at Chicago State University. I'm also an alumna of CSU and current member of the CSU Foundation's Alumni Council Advisory Board. And tonight we've teamed up with the Alumni Association to bring you this panel. This March, we will have been in the COVID-19 pandemic for 2 years, and it continues to affect every aspect of our existence. We now know that this disease is here to stay. As we adapt to our new normal, whatever that may look like for each of us, our need for self-care remains. And for many of us, it's growing by the minute. Like so many of you, my own self-care had to take a back seat for a while as I adjusted to the pandemic. Now I've begun paying attention to my eating habits, exercising more, and I'm hopeful for the positive strides that I'm making. But what about mental health? With all of the changes to how we manage our work, our homes, our family, our mental health is oftentimes the last thing that we're thinking about, but we can't continue to put it on the back burner. This is a marathon, not a sprint, and it's left many of us absent of a strategy for the mental health long game that we really need in these unprecedented times. With that in mind, we hope you get a lot out of tonight's conversation entitled Self-Care in a Continuing Pandemic, the Mental Health Long Game. To begin, I'd like to introduce to you tonight's moderator, Dr. Tonya Hall. Dr. Hall has a PhD in psychology, and she serves as both an associate professor of psychology here at CSU and as a staff psychologist at our counseling center. Dr. Hall has been working the front lines of mental health care in this pandemic since it began. Dr. Hall, take it away for us.
Thank you, Dr. Davis, for that introduction. I am Dr. Tonya Hall, and I am excited to moderate this timely discussion today. Let's meet our panelists now, shall we? Dr. Jacqueline Darby is a licensed psychologist and certified group psychotherapist. She currently serves as the Assistant Director of Outreach and Consultation at American University, in addition to being an adjunct faculty member and writer. Dr. Darby founded The Unconscious Shift, a wellness consulting agency that focuses on providing trainings on mental health wellness to community organizations. She is a Chicago State University alumna, graduating with her bachelor's degree in psychology in 2009, and received her PsyD from the American School of Professional Psychology. Don Edwards is a licensed professional counselor with a master's in school counseling and a master's in psychology. She has worked as a high school counselor and practices therapy at Tranquil Journey Counseling Center. She is certified in stress management and will begin her doctoral studies in community psychology at National Louis University this year. Dr. Sherilyn Garrett is a colleague of mine here at Chicago State University. She is a licensed clinical professional counselor and a doctor of education in counseling psychology. Dr. Garrett is an assistant professor of psychology here at CSU and the director for CSU's graduate counseling program, specializing in self-care and self-love mental health counseling. Titani Harris is a licensed clinical social worker, psychotherapist, certified balanced living coach, author, and speaker. Ms. Harris is the CEO of TMH Behavioral Services, which is a behavioral health clinic specializing in individual and family therapy. Ms. Harris is also the founder of TMH Man Cave, a nonprofit created to bring awareness and eliminate the stigma associated with the mental health needs of Black men. Additionally, Titani serves on the board of directors at ULIC Children's Advantage Network, or UCAN, in Chicago, Illinois. Let's get started. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Okay, so let's start with our first question. The first question is, what is the current state of the COVID-19 pandemic? Like the Omicron variant's latest data, what we know about after almost 2 years, and what remains unknown, and focus on new developments as well. Okay, and let's start with Dr. Garrett.
Well, you said a whole mouthful. What I would say is that we're still learning every day. The information is changing from day to day. We know that some of the rules that we have in place have shifted, and people are showing a lot more adherence to some of the rules that they put in place as far as in Illinois, but the outbreak is still real. And it is not going anywhere. Someone said, Dr. Davis said in her opening, so we just have to shift to our new normal. I do believe that this is our new normal and that we are just having to thrive within it, and that we are just having to adjust as we continue to go forward. That's what I would say.
Okay, thank you. Next, Titani Harris.
Yes, Dr. Garrett and Dr. Tiffany Davis so eloquently stated everything. This is our new normal. The numbers are changing daily, right? There's a new variant, I feel like every other week. And so we are all just adjusting to where we are.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Darby.
I feel like I'm just copying everybody's answers. Exactly what everyone's saying, right? It's ever changing, it's ever evolving. But one thing that we should know is that as it's continuing to develop, so are we. So as it's developing, we're also developing different ways to manage and cope with the various stressors that come away so that we can, Dr. Garrett was saying, thrive in this pandemic.
Thank you. And Don Edwards.
Yeah, just as Dr. Darby just stated, there are some positives that have come out of this. And while we're still dealing with the virus and everything that it's throwing at us, learning new things every day and how to protect ourselves, there are some positives that come out of it in terms of learning how to kind of pivot, learning how to take care of ourselves better, which is, what we're talking about this evening.
Great, great. So working from home began as an unplanned benefit of this pandemic, with positive effects felt immediately. More time with family, zero commute, even learning to cook and other home-based, less expensive family-focused hobbies. Now, after almost 2 years, how does this continue to affect us positively as well as negatively? And let's start with Titani this time.
Sure. I think you said it best in terms of the positive effects, right? Working from home, in terms of spending more time with family, zero commute, learning how to cook, and so on. But I want to acknowledge that working from home has not been seen as a benefit for everyone. Some people have felt the isolation and disconnect, not only from their families, but from the organizations that they work for, and from not being around their colleagues as a result of the minimal contact, right? And so working from home often removes some of the distractions from being in an office. However, there are some people who don't have a dedicated quiet space to be productive at home. And so folks are still struggling to differentiate between work life and home life, which can be stressful and lead to burnout.
Absolutely. Okay, Dr. Garrett.
So I'm shaking my head in agreement with you, because a lot of people that I've come into contact with definitely did not like to be at home. As someone who's always on the go, like I'm sure the rest of you, my panelists, coming home for me was a different kind of thing. So I'm like, I am definitely the person that was out talking to people, doing things. So the first couple of weeks, I'm like, what? Oh, what? I can't travel? What? So I had to, adjust myself as well, and making sure that I was doing things creatively for those around me as well, to make sure that we were still having contact, and making sure that even though we weren't in person, that they did still feel supported. And so we did that. We developed text threads, and we made sure that we sent each other videos, all kinds of things, just so that we would remain in contact. And quickly I said to them previously that my girlfriends and I, who are my travel companions, we developed a once-a-week Zoom meeting. And we did all kinds of things for that first year. Every Saturday, we never missed a Saturday, and making sure that we had themes. And so that was very important for all of us, to make sure that we were engaging and keeping up our sisterhood. So those were things that we're doing and that we did. And that was a positive spin on us all slowing down.
Excellent.
I think,
Dr. Darby.
Go ahead.
You want to go ahead? I'll let you
go ahead.
Okay. I'm like, I'm doing double dutch. I'm trying to
right. I'm like, who's gonna go next?
No, I think what everyone's speaking about is intentionality. So being at home allowed us to be intentional of how we're going to spend our time and how we separate spaces. Even though we're working from home, we still want to have a work-life balance. I don't want to check notes and do stuff after I'm supposed to be off of work. And so we were able to say, okay, I'm purposely going to log off now and move from the spot, because it could be so easy to get caught up in just working 24/7. I think also too is that people are taking the space to really explore themselves and figure out, like, well, what do I like to do? Let me try this hobby. Let me try baking. Let me try pottery. Let me try drawing. Maybe I can try a new, different type of Netflix show that I've never seen before. So it really encouraged us to actually be mindful of who we were as individuals, and to say, like, let me put my health first. Because now you never realize how many steps you take in the office until you don't have an office. And so now it's like, okay, if I'm going to continue working out, I have to purposely and intentionally do things and plan things so I can get that extra health benefit that naturally will come because I'm walking from the parking garage to my office space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes sense. Don Edwards?
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree. When I was working from home, I really was intentional to cut it off at a certain time and make sure that, I had a different space and a different thought pattern for, my evening. But also, I think people are still working or thinking and working out that working job, what all that means now, because people just started thinking differently. Like, hey, do I really need to go into the office to do what I have to do? So I think a lot of innovation has come out of this. I know the students, a lot of students that I've worked with are wanting to graduate early to start businesses. Just to, work on different things. So I think the thought pattern has changed. Like, we don't have to do things the way we used to do them. We can adjust and do something different. So I think I've been really impressed with the innovation that has come out of the work and the labor force.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Okay, so we know now more about this pandemic and isolation and how it can affect our mental health. How does this pandemic continuing into a third year change, improve, or worsen that? Dr. Garrett.
So I definitely know some people that I worked with that had really difficult times, anxiety, definitely in the beginning. I think now they have, as things have shifted and we've learned more about what was going on, things have gotten better, especially since they were able to kind of go out and about and resume some of the activities that were occurring and some of the things as therapists that we were telling them to do for self-care. I was talking about exercising, engaging in music, doing things, just the same kind of things that the other panelists had stated. And so they were able to resume some of those activities. Again, I think, just like the last panelist said, is being innovative about and creative about how we are, and intentional as well about how we are moving forward in the day-to-day operations. We've returned to campus, so we're seeing our students, whereas for almost a 2-year period, we were not. We were seeing them via Zoom. And so now it's a little bit different, and we're getting the opportunity to be together. And while we're making sure that we take every step, we are, to be safe, we are having that contact that we hadn't had prior. So I think things are getting better as long as we are aware of what's coming out and following the guidelines.
Great. Okay. Titani.
Yes. So I think, like, you know, there are some positives, but I also want to talk about pandemic fatigue, right? So that's the exhaustion, the doubt and confusion around the pandemic as a whole. Let's be honest, when this thing started 2 years ago, no one thought we'll still be here wearing masks, the social distancing still, the rules and restrictions around being vaccinated or not, right? There's still some level of uncertainty and fear. And so I think it's important to acknowledge that.
Absolutely. Don Edwards?
Yeah, and you know what, the stress that comes from being in this pandemic. Of course, we deal with stress every day. We before the pandemic, you know, you have stress in terms of your job or relationships or what have you. But now we are collectively dealing with this pandemic stressfully. A lot of it is now turning into chronic stress. And we saw with the virus how it affected our health. And those people who had underlying health conditions or health conditions, that stress is an underlying factor in that. And it impacted them even more. So diabetes or heart disease, high blood pressure, they were definitely impacted. So we saw and continue to see how taking care of ourselves, to go back to what the panelists have been saying, Dr. Garrett and Dr. Hall, taking care of yourself is of the utmost importance because we see how it impacts us when our health or our immune systems are not working up to par.
Absolutely. And Dr. Darby.
Yes, I agree with everyone saying. I also think too that if you ever work with me, it's sort of clinically, you know, I'll say the human body is meant to survive. We will do what we need to do to make it through. And so we're seeing how, for lack of a better word, resilient humans are when it comes to these things, because we are adapting, we are making way. But also see too that human beings are now, we're like, let's have a conversation about mental health. Before, mental health was like, we don't talk about burnout. We don't talk about mental health. We don't do anything like that. And now we're actually having these conversations like, hey, who's your therapist? Girl, let's talk about medication. I need to go to so-and-so. So we're having these active conversations now, which I don't think we would have had as openly if the pandemic hadn't shown us. It's important to have your focus on your mental health. And so that's the positive spin about this. And as we're going into year 3 and possibly year 4, I think the innovation regarding mental health is going to continue to grow and allow for more access for people to actually finally have the opportunity to take care of their mental health that they haven't had before.
Dr. Darby, it's chipping away at that stigma. Totally agree with you. That has always been in our community. And now people are starting to see that your mental health has to be a priority. It's got to be a priority.
And
And,
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Dr. Sherlyn. Go ahead.
That's okay. All I was going to say is I don't think that we would have had this not occurred. And so the work-life balance was something that people always kind of struggled with, but it brought it to the forefront. The anxiety, like we're talking about, was something that they struggled with. Okay, well, I can get medication, but I'm not going to talk about it, and definitely not going to talk to a therapist about it. But when people find out your therapist, whether you're online doing something, it might be personal, they are like, where can you refer me?
Right.
I get text messages all times of night, all kinds of things. Look, I want help. So when they say that, I'm like, let me give you this information. But I notice for the first time in the 20 years that I've done this, this has been the only time that I've had this kind of response.
And I was going to add to that is that I think the conversation around mental health is big is because we are experiencing a shared trauma, right? Absolutely. Especially us as mental health professionals. This is the first time that I can think of that we're collectively experiencing the trauma with our clients. And so everyone is being affected. And so that's why the conversation is so needed. Mental health is like a trend now. Like all of us have been I've been a therapist for over 10 years. So I've never, been so just amazed at how mental health is just on the forefront now. So just wanted to add that.
Yeah. And the dynamic too, just the fact that we're collectively dealing with this. Like I thought, you think, okay, veterans who come back from war or someone who has been a witness to a violent assault or, violence or something like that. But now, it's going to be so interesting to kind of study how we collectively have been impacted, how we're dealing with this. I mean, just worldwide.
So even the long-term effects.
Exactly.
Because even the long-term effects, like the doctors, I always say the doctors and nurses are dealing with this like now, but mental health professionals are going to be dealing with this for years to come.
Absolutely.
And the effects of the pandemic on ourselves mentally.
And I think it's not just a conversation that's having in our community, but on a national level, like with our representatives, with our Congress, there's a lot of movement that's happening to get people access. I'm thinking of the Psych Pact, how fast how states are getting a part of that and having those conversations. Like, why aren't we providing telehealth? How do we do this? Like the boom of telehealth, the boom of apps, of mental health wellness apps, quality mental health wellness apps. The fact that insurances are covering mental health and telehealth. We would not have had these push and advancements if we weren't still actively, collectively going through this. This is not just a selective people's problem. This is an everyone universal problem that we're like, yo, we need to get this fixed now. And shout out to all the people who are on the ground advocating for mental health because they're doing a lot of the work that they've been doing for a long time. And it's just now like, wow, thank you. We recognize the importance of it.
And Governor Pritzker with the mental health days for the students. I was like, wow. So the next step would be some mental health days for us, so we can,
So what's so interesting is, and my staff, I encourage and I actually mandate that each therapist on my team take 2 mental health care days per month. It is mandatory. So
this is great information. So I'd like to just take the time to say to our guest watching, feel free to email questions for the panel to foundations@csu.edu. And I will be going through some of those later in the hour. Okay, so for our next question, the pandemic experience has been described by experts as a trauma. Explain what this means, that the pandemic is a trauma. And let's start again with Dr. Garrett.
So we already know that a trauma is an emotional response to a terrible event, and this has been life-altering. All of a sudden, we were completely shut down. Never, ever have we experienced that before. And so it is something that We talked about, like she said, people coming back from war, the soldiers who've come back from war. And this, we know that when you have experienced a trauma, you have a longer term reaction. And so we're talking about the people's lack of maybe being able to sleep, flashbacks, strained relationships, sometimes even with being somatic concerns about their body's reaction to the trauma. And so we are experiencing that, as she said, collectively. So it's around the world. Everybody experienced it at one time. And so it's something that is continuous, and it's something that we will see the effects of long term. And that's what we've kind of already stated.
Thank you. And Titani?
I'm sure Dr. Sherilyn said it best. You know, a trauma is an emotional or physical response to a distressful event. And this pandemic has been traumatic, right? It's a traumatic event because of the fear of one's safety for not only themselves, but their loved ones. People are worried about becoming sick or even dying from COVID or Omicron or Delta, all the different variants, right? The past chronic lack of uncertainty and the social isolation, this pandemic has affected our overall mental health, which has resulted in you know, what I've seen in my work, in some people developing PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Dawn Edwards?
Yeah, and so that trauma that we're experiencing, like we said, collectively, can definitely, as we look at the, you know, maybe long-term effects, definitely the long-term effects, people who have lost loved ones, there's been so much loss there, and dealing with that. But it also can show up just kind of in our everyday lives even more. So like that, maybe emotional eating, substance abuse being increased, just kind of dealing with you know, drinking, online shopping. I know that was
I was gonna say, does Amazon shop on the Amazon account?
I need Amazon stock.
It counts.
I know, I do too. Online shopping, all those kinds of things, because we needed something, you know, to kind of put our attention to, and so if it gets out of hand, you know, online shopping to a certain point. But if it gets out of hand, drinking, because I know a lot of people were, you know, doing a lot of video and they had their wine, you know, the girlfriends with the wine and so on and so forth. But if that gets out of hand, that can, you know, impact people's lives definitely negatively. And so, you know, we don't want that to happen. We want to keep things moderate. And so that's why the trauma can't go unchecked. We have to be aware of it and be mindful of it, and watch how we deal with it.
Absolutely. And Dr. Darby?
And I think another piece too is that for a trauma response is an activation of your adrenaline, your anxiety response, that still happens even after the event has passed. Mm-hmm. So you're still responding to the present as if you're back in the past. Mm-hmm. And so it'd be interesting to see once this is settled down, air quotes, you can't see me, my air quotes, as we see, interesting to see how people are still responding as if we're in that panic, still having those buying, hoarding tendencies, maybe like, hey, don't stand too close to me, or keys, wallet, mask, like still doing the, you know, pat down, even after, hey, everything is good and calm. But also what makes this experience unique is that it's not just one trauma with even COVID-19, but then we had all the social political unrest happening at the same time. And we had the financial crash
race-based trauma
at the same time. So it's trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma, and we're feeling the weight of it all at once. So it's like, well, what am I really responding to? Because I feel I'm at a constant state of fight or freeze all the time.
And this past election was
yes
traumatic. So all of that on top of, you know, everything that you just said, Dr. Darby, just yes.
And then there's groceries.
Important.
Yeah, we talked about groceries, but also one of the other things that we didn't talk about, or we haven't, is the survivor guilt for those that have survived and they've lost a lot of people and they feel guilty related to that. And that's something that we haven't talked about as a collective either. And so that's something that I wanted to just throw out there, them feeling guilty that they survived and maybe a sibling didn't, or someone that they were close to didn't, and having to have the conversation about grief and loss and then still living through this continued trauma.
Right. Also, even talk about guilt, even the guilt of maybe you got someone sick.
Exactly. Yes. That's what I'm talking about too.
That guilt too of like, oh, I passed this. I could be in danger, a danger to someone that I love and unintentionally causing harm. Yeah, exactly. Talking all about that's the trauma we're talking about, and having to help people navigate those complex feelings that are natural that come up to this unnatural event that's happening.
And Dr. Aubrey, I like how you said like it's ongoing, right? There'll be nothing post about this experience long term, right? Especially for some people mentally.
Yeah, and that's why we're here.
Yep. Exactly.
Great answers. So let's look at the next question. Based on what you just said, what are some trauma-informed care practices you would recommend to an average person struggling right now with this seemingly unending pandemic? And let's start with Dr. Garrett.
My first thing is to definitely the one thing I would say is definitely seek help. I'm gonna keep saying find your therapist. That's one of the best things that you can do for yourself. And if you don't find someone you like immediately, look at someone else. Just don't give up. One of the things is also making sure that you're taking care of yourself first medically and that you're medically stable. And then if you do need medication, try to be open to the idea. But there's so many things that we can do to work well together as professionals, and making sure that you have a care team that is working towards you and for you. And then we have, I have other tips and things that I'm sure that we'll get to about how we continue this self-care. But the self-care piece first is making sure that you're medically stable and that you're taking care of those needs first.
Okay, thank you. Titani?
Yes, when I think about, some trauma-informed care practices for folks who are struggling right now, the first thing I think about is safety, right? Pre-pandemic, I know being a therapist who works with children and works with CPS, there were students who felt unsafe at home, right? And victims of domestic violence. So I think safety is number one. Also staying connected with others, being compassionate and caring. I also think there needs to be some form of cultural safety and responsiveness to this pandemic. And what I mean is the messaging needs to draw on our cultural strengths, so there's trust and people have access to appropriate healthcare services.
Thank you. Dawn Edwards?
Yeah, and I would definitely say to add to that, to just kind of try to be aware and mindful of where you are and give yourself grace. We've all gone through this, going through it, and it is a tough time. So definitely getting help, not to be afraid to get help, or just to talk to someone. So that you can get those emotions out, because suppressing them then, causes a negative impact. So giving yourself some grace and time, because we're all dealing with this. And as Titani said, compassion and kindness, I think is huge right now. I talking to a client the other day, and she works in the customer service business, and people are just being really mean right now, for lack of a better word. And I know it was on the news. I think just have short fuses, so kind of finding it within yourself, because I think one of my favorite quotes is that you just never know what someone else is going through. Now, we know we're all dealing with this pandemic in a different way. So, kind of be patient with ourselves and patient with, the people that we're coming in contact with.
Absolutely. And that compassion and kindness is really essential.
Definitely.
Dr. Darby.
I agree. I think I want to put what trauma-informed means, because we all know what it means. But also what it means for people is just that we're taking the understanding that your behavior is coming from a place of trauma. It's a response to trauma. So you may be acting out. It's not that you're a bad person. It's more like, well, because of a trauma, something happened where you learn that this behavior will get you your needs met. So taking that lens of like, okay, what am I doing now that's a response to what I've been experienced? So that way I can put a context and conceptualize what I'm doing going forward. So to me, when I start with trauma-informed care practice, I'm like, okay, let's put into context. Let's look at the story. Where's your beginning? Where's your middle? What's the end? Let's see where you're at in that process. How do you want the end to shape and be like? Because now you have the power to change that, to inform that. I also start with the basis of how's your sleeping? How's your eating? How's your interpersonal relationships? How are you able to have a space where you can think, where you can share your emotions, you can feel your emotions? Because if you don't have that, then we can't do all the other deep stuff when it comes to trauma-informed care. I need to start there first. And so making sure people realize when you're working and you take a lunch break, get up from the desk and go somewhere. Actually sit down and eat a whole meal, not just something quick and snibbling on. Get all your 8 hours of sleep, at least. Hopefully, that would be great. Use your Fitbit to tell you, or your tracking device to tell you where you're looking at. That's how you shape the foundations of trauma-informed care, so that you can do the other things that everybody else has been talking about, because we want to make sure we add context to why am I doing the things that I'm doing.
Great comment. Okay, so our youngest children, ages 4 and younger, do not know a world any different than this. They have not yet been socialized otherwise. Other abnormal habits, such as staying 6 feet apart and not hugging others, they currently think are the norm. What does this mean for their futures? And how can parents get this situation back on the right track? What might be some behaviors parents can watch out for in their young children to alert them to that, they need help? Or what can parents say to their children to help ease their fears and anxiety? And let's start with Dr. Garrett.
Okay, so one of the things that I definitely want to say is that, of course, this is what they know. And those specifically that have been born in the last couple of years, that were born in 2020, and they are toddlers now. We're like, okay, careful, put your mask on, do this, do that. This is all that they know. So one of the things that we've tried to make sure that we're talking to parents about is making sure that they are maybe doing some scaled back play dates to try to make sure that they have some social interaction, where as maybe before they would have quite a few participants, that maybe they do 2 to 3 so that they can have some socialization, to making sure that they are teaching them maybe how to take turns, those things that they maybe would have learned previously in a natural environment. Making sure that they are making it as normal as they can for them when they see anxiety, like the crying or some of the behaviors, knowing how to speak with them at the level of where they are. So meeting them where they are, not giving them too much information, just giving them enough to try to help them understand where we are, that this isn't always how it has been. But I think back to those same kids and the same things that happened with 911. The world was different. And so as we talk to those kids that are now adults, this is how it used to be. And so making sure that we give them just enough information to try to help them through a crisis situation for them, and trying to make sure that the things that the hugging, I always make sure that when I'm with younger people that it's something that I do safely, and just trying to normalize it for them, because they won't know what it's like, and they won't know what it was like before. So we just have to try to work through that as best we can.
That sounds wonderful. Titani, if you could give me from this point a brief response. Thank you.
Sure. Dr. Garrett covered it all. I'll just add a few more tips and just say that she's, and like Dr. Garrett said, this is their normal, right? And some other things that parents can do is listen to these children, right? We know that children see the world differently than adults. And so it's important that we validate their feelings and their thoughts, even if it doesn't make sense to us. Also teaching them some coping skills like drawing and puzzles and limiting their screen time, and also connecting with other parents.
Great. Don Edwards?
Yeah, I would just definitely say acknowledge and listen to them. Some of those behaviors that Dr. Darby just talked about in terms of, how they might be acting out. Watch for some of those behaviors and don't just dismiss them as bad behavior, because it might be a cry for help. So acknowledging their emotions and whatever they're feeling, because they do see the world from a different perspective. And so just listening and hearing out what they're saying and how they want to express those emotions, because what we don't want to do is suppress those emotions, right? Because then they come out in a different way. It might be depression or sadness or anger or harming themselves. And so we don't want to do that. I would also say, even though sometimes kids, or children, young adults kick and scream about routines are pretty good in terms of, structure and giving them balance and something to look forward to. When they're out of the routine, like the pandemic kind of took them out of it to be at home for remote learning, it really impacted a lot of students negatively, because they didn't like the whole being on the computer learning and that kind of thing. So it made it different and challenging, and they adjusted. But those routines are very structural and good for them.
Great. So I'll ask the final question, and then we'll look to the chat for additional questions. To conclude, as a takeaway for our guest, what is each expert's own personal prescription for their own mental health self-care right now? You have 1 minute. Let's start with Dr. Garrett.
Oh, I get this. Mine is laughter. It is something that I have to do every single day. Laughter has gotten me through this pandemic, and I told everybody I'm addicted to TikTok because I love the laughter that it provides. And so if I have a break, I might stand up and walk around, but I am definitely not far from my phone, so I can do my TikTok laughs of the day. The dancing. I also love music, so definitely having my music in the background is very soothing for me. Making sure that if I'm able to travel and travel safely, that's something that I've gotten back to. I've gotten to see my family for the first time in a couple years, and so that was a good thing because they're all out of state. And so being able to do that and take care of myself and learn new things, which was something that I did do during the pandemic. I did a garden, I did flowers and things like that. And people are like, what? And I was like, yeah. Wow. So those kinds of things, learning new activities, baking, cooking, doing things that I had not had the opportunity to do, and also making sure that my health was taken care of. I missed a ton of appointments prior to the pandemic. So making sure that now I am very much zeroed in on what I need to do to take care of me.
Thank you. Titani, 1 minute.
Yes, my number one form of self-care is saying no. I say yes to too many things. And so one of the things that I focus on is saying no to things that I just don't want to do, and being okay with that, owning that no is a reason. Like, I don't need a reason why I don't want to do something. So that's number one for me. Number two is exercise. I'm in the gym 5-6 days a week, and I like that I get to mix it up, whether I'm at home, whether I get to go to LA Fitness, Expo, wherever. I'm also traveling, safety. I've started back traveling, leaning on my support system. I am a mommy auntie, so spending time with my nieces and my nephews, journaling. I love to journal, and also reading and just attending sporting events. Those are my forms of self-care.
Thank you. Don Edwards, 1 minute, please.
Yeah, so everything that they just said, I am also really impacted by my morning and evening routine. So I definitely start my day with prayer and meditation, try to get in my exercise, and I've got to drink my water. So I'm starting the day with those things, again, being intentional about it, listening to something inspirational to keep me motivated, keep me going. And then in the evening, same thing. And so look, my therapist, and we talked and realized I didn't really have a good, evening routine, just kind of coming home stressed and dealing with the day and dealing with things around me. How are you coming down from that? How are you dealing with that at night? So one of the things that I do is I write down my 3 things that I'm grateful for, but I also look for the good in my day. So I do one good thing that has happened to me today or that I can pull out and just say that was good. So those are some things that I do, and have my tea and, just kind of come down from the day. And that's new for me because I hadn't done that before.
Great. A cup of tea sounds great right now. Dr. Darby, 1 minute, please.
I'm just here taking notes, getting ideas, because you always can look at stuff carefully.
I love it.
One thing that I do is I have what I call a bougie event of the month. Air quotes on bougie. It's just something different and fun where I plan intentionally to take out and not do anything work related. So it could be going to a park. It could be going to a new restaurant. It could be, if I'm safe, if the numbers are okay, going to a quick day trip, whatever. It's just something where I plan, I sit down, plan, put it in my calendar so I can't move it. And that's once a month. And like I'm on IG, so I put picture on IG. And so my friends know, like, oh, what's your bougie event of the month this week? Or this month? What are you doing this month? Here's some ideas for you. I'm like, okay, thank you. But that's just knowing, like, okay, I have this day or this weekend where don't pick up a book, don't look at a notebook, don't even look at your email. That's just for you to recharge. So that's one thing I definitely do for my own mental health.
That's great. Thank you, everyone, for your comments. And now let's take a look at the chat. Some questions from our guest. The first question, my husband and I seem to exhibit depression or stress differently. Are there considerations for gender that I should be aware of when it comes to dealing with my own stress and how to respond to his? And who would like to take that question?
I can take it.
Thank you.
I think depression looks differently in men and in women. So I think in men we see, at least in my work, because I primarily work with men, Black men specifically, I see increase in physical and chronic pain, loss of focus, anger, some sexual dysfunction, and suicidal thoughts. I think in women, oftentimes we associate depression with crying and lack of energy and little to no sleep, but also there's nervous habits that are developed, maybe some goal avoidance, worrying about just day to day and carrying that superwoman syndrome and self-medicating. And I think to answer the viewers' questions in terms of how to, deal with her husband, I think what's important is to give him his space, to give each other your space, right? So like when you come home from work or when you move from the living room to the bedroom, because some of us are still working from home, to not just go right in with the issue, to kind of give each other that space to kind of process the day. And so oftentimes some men may say, well, I don't want to talk about it right now, but respecting that and then kind of going back to the moment.
Sounds great. Sounds great. Good comments. Next, my work situation has announced it will not change anytime soon. For those of us for whom working from home has been an ongoing bad thing, causing more stress than less, what are a few specific things that I can do to manage this better? I've been just biding my time for the end of this and that I now realize may never come. Who would like to take that question?
I can attempt to try this one. So a couple of things. One, talking with your supervisor. Do you have the flexibility to coming in the office even though you guys are not working from the office? That might be a possibility. If that's not a possibility, then try to think of looking at co-working spaces where maybe if you're able to rent out for a couple of hours so that you can have a break from being at home, so you can have your own personal space. It can also be maybe if you have a couple other coworkers that live nearby, maybe if you safely can work together at a space so you still have that sense of community that comes with it. Lastly, if that doesn't work, try to figure out, well, what's making it bad? And maybe that's where we need to start first, to figure out rearranging your home space so that it could be a less stressful for you. And that could be a better opportunity to either have come to whoever moment. It could be maybe sitting with a therapist and having those long conversations to figure out specifically, there you go, what is actually causing the stress in your life. Because sometimes what we do is we attribute stress to one thing, but if we sit and think about it, it's actually a whole other different things that we don't want to address because, it's hard, but we're going to say it's this. So actually sitting down and letting the answer bubble up, say, okay, this is what the actual problem is, and maybe I can find a solution to change that. Yeah.
Great.
Hope that helps.
Thank you. Another guest asked, I've been struggling with concentration while working from home, but I am not distracted like others are. I have no kids at home. I have a proper workspace, etc. But not being in the office is making me less productive, while colleagues of mine seem to appreciate how much more productive they feel by having a better work-life balance. What am I doing wrong? I don't feel depressed, but maybe I am. How can I tell? What can I do to fix this? And who would like to take that question?
So I can just offer a few tips, just thinking about how I was when I was working from home. And we talked about routines earlier. And I know that, when you're at home, you have this mindset, well, I'm at home, I can go in the kitchen, I can, kind of wear sweats, that kind of thing. So one of the things that, again, we talked about in terms of routine is to get up, wash your face, put on your makeup, put on some clothes, have a designated area where you are doing your work, have your breakfast, then you come to your desk and really think of yourself, at work. I get that you're at home. However, this is, the hand that we've been dealt right now. So you've got to make some adjustments. And then really, if you take breaks, if you take a lunch, do those kinds of things where it's as close to your routine as you can get. You kind of want to look at those kinds of things so that you are not, I think as Dr. Darby said, kind of attributing it to something else, and really look at your systems that you're using at home. One of the other things that maybe, if you are a little distracted here and there, is I tend to use my phone, my timer, and even an egg timer. Even, if you tend to kind of wander, use that timer to say, I'm going to work, I'm going to focus on this project or this information that I need to get out for the next 20 minutes, the next 30 minutes. And then when that's done, you can move on to the next thing or take a break and continue to work on it. But using that timer, for me, kind of helps me just focus in. So if that might be something that you could use to help you to not be distracted.
Great. For those of us with family or associates that still think that this is political or fake or continue to believe misinformation, this causes me stress that seems unnecessary on top of the stress we're already dealing with. How can we manage that?
I see everybody else. I think we're all chomping at the bit. So I'm going to be the brave one this time. And then you guys please jump in.
Listen, I was going to jump in, but I said, I think Dr. Garrett has this. You had that look, Dr. Garrett, like, let me just shut this down. So I'm going to defer to you.
As soon as Dr. Hall said political, I'm like, oh okay.
My goodness. I don't even have the conversation anymore. I really don't have the conversation anymore about it being fake or any of those things. What I just say is that if you're not vaccinated, I cannot be around you. I can't, because of my own health issues. And so I just put it like that and know that I love you, but I'll see you on Zoom. That doesn't change, but I really am not having the conversation about it being fake news or any of those things. And people are well aware of the losses that other people have endured. I'm being sensitive to that, I'm sure that we all have lost people. But I do shut that conversation down, because politically, I'm not having that conversation with you. So I just basically do what I said, and then try to give them the space and opportunity. You've made your decisions, but I'm going to make mine. And that's kind of how I have to do. I'm protecting myself and my family. So you guys, I'm going to throw it to you, but I had to start by saying that.
No, you nailed it. But I also think it's just important for people to do what's best for them. Right.
Absolutely.
I'm one of those folks that I say, listen, if you don't want to be vaccinated, that's your choice. I'm going to do things to make sure I'm safe. So I would encourage this participant to continue to own your own space, own your own thoughts, and do what's best for you.
And I would add with that, you don't have to argue about it. It's not an argument.
Not even up for discussion.
It's not a discussion. So, take that stress off of you and off your plate, and let them do what they need to do to be safe for them, and you do what you need to do to be safe for you. As we've all stated, it is a choice. To me, it's not political, but it's a choice. So you don't have to argue or have like this deep, abiding conversation about it. Like Dr. Garrett said, you make the rules, in your house. And if they want to be a guest in your house, then that's what they have to abide by.
Yeah, as Dr. Garrett appreciates this, because the TikTok song, just drink water and mind your business. That's it.
I know that well.
So I would do that.
I have seen.
I'm gonna drink my water now.
Right.
Everybody take a sip of water, right?
Yes.
Right. There we go.
Okay. I think I'll take the last question and then we'll wrap up. These are really great answers and great questions as well. I work in a frontline customer service role, and people are mean these days in a way they were not previously. How can I manage my response to their stress in addition to all the other stress they're yelling at me piles on? And who will take that last question for tonight?
I mean, I think the same recommendations we gave the previous question fits this one too. Drink water in my business, but also recognizing that taking care of yourself first. And it's okay to politely walk away from a customer situation. Customer service means you are helping the customer. It doesn't mean you have to sit and be abused.
Yeah.
They're two different things.
Yeah.
So as someone who has worked at customer service, I have politely said, you know what? Let me go get my manager. And if you are the manager, say, excuse me, let me go check in the back real quick. Take a couple deep breaths and then go out about your day. That's totally fine and perfectly well for you to do.
And the same thing if they're on the phone. I put them on hold. I'm going to be right back with you. I need to take a few minutes. I'll be right back with you to check something out, place them on hold. Because it's violent over the phone as well. They wake up and choose that violence sometimes via phone. So that's the same thing. I place them on hold. Then I'll come back and try to continue the call. And if they continue to be irate, then my thing is I need to leave the line. And so that's the comment is I need to leave the line right now. And then I'll call you back when I'm able to.
And just knowing you don't have to take in that negative energy, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to take that in.
No need to take in negative energy. Okay. Well, this is great. Well, I would like to thank everyone for being here tonight. This panel was amazing, right? Thank you, ladies, for your experience and attention tonight. This topic was very timely with the new COVID-19 variants emerging, making dealing with these issues a moving target, but not impossible. And thank you to our audience. I hope that this was very helpful for you as we intended. I want to mention 2 upcoming virtual events you may be interested in attending. Next Thursday, February 3rd at 6 p.m. will be the virtual fireside chat between our Chicago State University President Z. Scott and the CTC CSU Alumni Association President Yvette Warren. Do not miss it. Also, on February 14th at 12:30, the CSU Counseling Department, along with the African American Male Resource Center, presents Black Mental Health Day, a critical dialogue surrounding the intricacies of Black mental health and wellness. Links and information about both of these events will be emailed and shared on social media. So be sure to follow the Chicago State University's Foundation's Facebook page for more information. Thank you, everyone, and have a good night.